The hum of printers and faint ding of the elevator mixed with early morning yarns and the hiss of espresso machines in the break room. It was just another Tuesday at Langford and Key's Financial, and no one was paying much attention to the man in the gray overalls. He moved quietly down the corridor, emptying trash bins and wiping down doorknobs with practiced ease. Most people passed him like wallpaper, a blur in the edge of their vision, just part of the scenery. Until he opened his mouth. Jared Langford, co-founder and current CEO, had arrived later than usual. He was juggling a phone call with a French client while checking emails on his tablet as he briskly walked past the accounting department. He didn't even register the janitor until something made him stop in his tracks. Fluent, elegant French. Not the clumsy kind you pick up from an app, but the kind that rolled with Parisian clarity and regional flair. It wasn't coming from his phone. It was coming from someone behind him. He turned slowly. There, by the recycling bins, stood the janitor, mid-conversation with a delivery guy holding a set of French-labeled parcels. The man's voice was calm, precise, filled with the kind of confidence only native speakers carry. Jared blanked. Maybe the guy had memorized a script. But then the janitor switched to German, smoothly redirecting a confused intern asking about the mailroom. A second later, he slipped into Japanese, responding to an apologetic temp who'd clearly gotten lost in translation. Jared said nothing for a beat. His mind, usually full of balance sheets and boardroom schedules, momentarily blanked. He'd walked past this man at least 50 times in the last 3 years. Always quiet, always polite, always unseen. Jared had no idea the janitor's name. "Excuse me," he said, stepping forward. The janitor looked up, startled but steady. "Yes, sir." What you just said, that was Japanese?" "Yes, and German before that, and French for the delivery man." Jared raised an eyebrow. "You speak all 3? The janitor nodded. "And a few more. Spanish, Korean, Russian, Arabic, Hindi. I dabble in Mandarin, too." "Dabble?" Jared echoed, stunned. A smile tugged at the janitor's lips. "Language is kinda my thing." "What's your name?" "Emmanuel Brown." Jared studied him a second longer. Emmanuel didn't look like a man putting on a show. There was no posturing, no arrogance, just the ease of someone stating facts. "You got a minute, Mr. Brown?" Sure, I guess." "Follow me." Emmanuel hesitated. He glanced at his cart, his mop bucket, the work badge clipped to his shirt like a permanent label. Then he shrugged, wiped his hands on a towel, and followed the CEO down the hall. They walked past stunned faces. People turned, murmured. No one had ever seen the CEO talk to custodial staff, let alone escort one to the executive wing. The air grew crisper as they ascended in the elevator. Emmanuel kept his posture straight, though his shoulders were tight. "I've worked here 5 years," he said, voice low as the elevator rose. "No one's ever taken me past floor 12. Jared smiled faintly. "Sometimes the higher floors miss what's already here." They stepped into a glass-paneled office filled with light and the faint scent of cedar wood. Emmanuel's eyes scanned the room. There was a photo of Jared's family, a collection of global currency framed on the wall, and a hand-carved chess set by the window. Emmanuel lingered on the pieces. "You play?" Jared asked. "Used to, back in the day." "Sit down, Emmanuel." He did, carefully. Jared sat across from him and leaned forward. "I want to ask you something. How did someone like you end up here? Don't take that the wrong way." Emmanuel chuckled, not offended, but used to the question. "It's a long story. You want the short or the real version?"
Always the real. Emmanuel exhaled. Born in Chicago, Mom was a school teacher, Dad did security. Big on books, real big. We had more paperbacks than plates some days. I picked up Spanish in high school, then German from a neighbor, French from my grandmother's old cassette tapes. Fell in love with words. Got a scholarship to study linguistics at the University of Michigan. Life was looking good. Jared listened quietly. Then my mom got sick. Dad left. Bills piled up. I dropped out 2 years in. Came back home, worked where I could. Supermarket, delivery, night shifts. Then my little brother got in trouble. Jail. I was the only one left to care for my niece, so I took a job. This job, because it had health benefits, steady hours, and I could be there for her. His voice didn't waver. No bitterness, just plain fact. And the languages? Kept at 'em. I read newspapers in different languages online, watched documentaries, practiced accents out loud in the janitor closet. He smiled, a little shy. It kept me sane. Jared leaned back, feeling a slow weight in his chest. Most people don't even remember your face, and yet here you are, the most globally fluent person in this building. Yeah, Emmanuel said softly. Funny how that works. Jared stood and looked out the window. The city sprawled below them. I think we've made a mistake, Mr. Brown. One I want to fix. What kind of mistake? The kind where brilliance is hiding in a janitor's closet. The air inside the executive suite shifted the moment Emmanuel stepped out of that office. People didn't say anything, at least not right away, but eyes lingered longer than usual. A few whispered behind half-shut doors. The janitor who'd just been in a closed-door meeting with the CEO? That didn't happen at Langford and Keys. Emmanuel walked back toward the service elevator, silent. His cart waited for him by the vending machines, right where he left it. He picked up the mop handle with a sigh, like waking from a dream you're not ready to leave. Jared, on the other hand, didn't go back to business as usual. He tried, opened emails, reviewed quarterly reports, skimmed over a vendor proposal. But Emmanuel's story sat heavy in his mind like an unopened letter. The languages, the calm composure, the fact that this man had spent 5 years in his building unseen by the very people who were supposedly trained to find talent. Jared had built Langford and Keys on innovation, but how many Emmanuel Browns had they walked past in the name of efficiency? Around 3 p.m., Jared walked into his chief operations officer. "Matt," he said, "I need a translator for tomorrow's call with the Dubai partners. Kendra's still out, right?" "Yeah, we're checking with the agency." "Don't. I have someone in mind." Matt looked puzzled, but Jared was already halfway out the door. 10 minutes later, Emmanuel found himself stepping into conference room B, confused, slightly wary, and very aware of the dress code mismatch. He didn't belong there. That's how it felt, even if no one said it. Suits filled the chairs, laptops clicked. Jared stood at the head of the table like nothing was unusual at all. "Mr. Brown will be assisting with today's call," Jared said simply. Heads turned. A few jaws nearly dropped. No one asked questions. Not out loud, anyway. The screen flickered to life. Dubai's regional leads joined the call, smiling stiffly through laggy video and accents sharpened by distance and pressure. One of them, Nadim, spoke English fairly well, but the others struggled. Misunderstandings had stalled this partnership for months. Then Emmanuel spoke. Smooth, polished. His Arabic didn't just convey meaning, it carried tone, nuance, humor. He wasn't translating word for word like software would. He was bridging gaps, catching context before it was lost. Within minutes, the call transformed. What used to be awkward pauses became fluid conversation. The Dubai team relaxed. They started asking better questions. Emmanuel even joked with one of the directors about football, earning the kind of laughter no spreadsheet could buy. Jared watched the whole thing unfold like a man watching the missing piece of a long unsolved puzzle fall into place. After the meeting, people trickled out. Some nodded to Emmanuel, others just stared, unsure what they'd witnessed. Matt pulled Jared aside. "Where the hell did you find him?" he whispered. Jared smiled. "Right under our noses." Later that evening, Emmanuel returned to the break room to finish the job he started before being summoned upstairs. His cart waited like a dog at a door, faithful, patient. He dipped the mop back into the bucket, the rhythm familiar, grounding. That's when someone approached. "I saw what you did in there," said a voice. Emmanuel turned. It was Maya, a payroll analyst from floor 10.
She rarely spoke to anyone, let alone him. "You were amazing," she added. He gave a quiet shrug. "Just helped out." "No," she said. "You changed something. You don't even know it yet." He gave a quiet shrug. She smiled, then left. At home that night, Emmanuel sat at his kitchen table with a half-eaten bowl of cereal and an old paperback French novel he'd read 4 times. His niece, now 15, lay on the couch watching a Korean drama, shouting half the words at the screen in exaggerated accents. "Hey," she said, turning down the volume. "Uncle Manny." "Yeah? You, do anything different today?" He hesitated. "Yeah, kind of." She studied him. "You look different, taller." He smiled. "That's just because you're always lying down." She tossed a pillow at him, giggling. He didn't tell her everything, not yet. But he did look at her differently. Like maybe, just maybe, she'd never have to shrink herself to survive the way he did. The next morning, Jared called an emergency executive meeting. Not about quarterly profits, not about vendor delays. About talent. "I want a new position created," he said to the room full of suits. "Effective immediately," asked Susan from HR. "For what exactly?" "A cultural intelligence lead. Someone to act as a linguistic and cultural bridge across all our international clients. Someone with the ability to translate more than just words." "Who?" someone asked. Jared met their eyes one by one. Emmanuel Brown. Silence. A beat passed. Then the question started. "A janitor? He doesn't even have a degree. This'll make headlines, and not in a good way." Jared stood firm, then let it. "But sir," Susan pressed, "we have protocols, promotions, career tracks." "And yet," Jared said calmly, "not one of your protocols caught what I saw yesterday." The room fell quiet. Because deep down, everyone knew. He was right. Some emailed congratulations. Some sent questions. And some sent none at all. But the moment that stayed with Emmanuel came from the security guard on the night shift. As Emmanuel passed through the lobby that evening, his first time leaving the building in a shirt and tie instead of overalls, the guard stopped him. "You showed a lot of people something today," he said quietly, "including me." Emmanuel smiled. "We all just need one person to see us." And as he stepped outside, something in him shifted. Not pride, he wasn't used to wearing that yet, but something close. Maybe this was what being seen felt like. Back upstairs, Jared sat with his leadership team. "I don't care what school someone came from, or what title they have," he said. "If someone can move the needle, build bridges, create value, they deserve to be at the table." His voice was calm but resolute. "Starting next quarter, we're reviewing our entire internal talent structure. No more hiring blind to what's already in our building." A few executives exchanged glances. "You're opening the floodgates," Matt said. "No," Jared replied. "I'm just knocking down the walls." By the following week, Emmanuel's office had become something of a magnet, though not in the way he expected. People began stopping by, not with flowers or fanfare, but with questions, folders, awkward greetings, and in some cases, apologies wrapped in nervous jokes. "Didn't know you had all that in you," one team lead from IT said, half laughing, half shrugging. "I did," Emmanuel replied. "I just didn't advertise." And that's what confused people the most. He didn't gloat. He didn't flash credentials, because he didn't have the kind that usually counted in corporate towers. What he had was rarer: fluency, humility, and the skill to bridge cultures without breaking a sweat. The ripple effects of his presence started to show. Old vendor contracts were revisited. Emmanuel spotted mistranslations that had lingered unchecked for years. Small errors that changed pricing, altered terms, even caused delays. He corrected them without complaint, but the corrections saved thousands. He joined a call with a Korean manufacturing partner. Within minutes, the tone of the conversation changed. Where the company had once struggled to maintain a respectful tone across language gaps, Emmanuel made sure they were speaking not just in words, but in respect. And then came the invite. An international logistics conference in Boston was being held in 2 weeks. One of Langford and Key's key partners would be presenting. Jarrett wanted someone to represent the company during a multilingual breakout session. "You're the obvious choice," Jarrett told him during a check-in. "You know the material, you know the people, you speak the language, literally." Emmanuel froze. "I've never spoken at a conference." "You've spoken in warehouses, hallways, mop closets, and in front of people who didn't believe you belonged. You'll be fine." He agreed, cautiously, but inside, fear crept in. It wasn't the languages that worried him. It was being seen on that scale, publicly, openly. No uniform to hide behind, no mop to disappear behind. He went home that night more nervous than he'd been in years. He sat on the couch, flipping through channels, not really watching anything. His niece sat next to him, feet curled beneath her, sketching in a notebook.
"You okay?" she asked. "Not sure. You ever get nervous doing those language talks?" "Every time." She looked up. "Then why do it?" He paused. "Because someone out there doesn't believe a guy like me can do it, and I need them to see otherwise." She nodded. "You should wear that blazer, the gray one. Makes you look like a professor." He smiled. "That's because it used to belong to one." The next day, HR called him about travel arrangements, plane tickets, hotel reservations, per diem allowances. It felt unreal, like something designed for someone else, someone official. At the same time, beneath the surface, resistance brewed. Some senior managers, especially those who'd waited years for their own promotions, weren't thrilled. In the break rooms and quiet Slack channels, frustration simmered. He didn't climb the ladder, he got carried up by a feel-good story. What next? Interns running departments? But Emmanuel kept moving. He wasn't here for validation. He was here for the job, and he was good at it. A few days later, a marketing analyst named Priya approached him. "Mr. Brown," she said softly, "my parents are immigrants. When I was little, I used to be embarrassed they couldn't speak English well." He nodded, listening. "But watching you, you made me feel like being multilingual is a superpower." "It is," he said. "People just need to stop pretending it isn't." Before she left, she said, "Thank you for walking in here like you belonged, even when people thought you didn't." He didn't reply right away. Because the truth was, he hadn't always felt like he belonged. Most of the time, he still wasn't sure. But every day, he stepped further into the light. And it was starting to feel less like a spotlight and more like home. The day of the conference arrived with more nerves than Emmanuel cared to admit. His niece had pressed his blazer the night before, setting it out carefully on the back of the couch like it was armor. At the airport, he moved like a man caught between two worlds, still mentally checking for his old ID badge, still half expecting someone to tap him on the shoulder and say there'd been a mistake. But there wasn't. His name was on the flight list. The company credit card covered his meals. And at check-in, the clerk handed him a branded tote and a badge that read, "Emmanuel Brown, Langford and Key's Financial, Cultural Intelligence Lead." He turned the badge over in his hand, like it might disappear if he blinked. The hotel was polished, the lobby full of well-dressed professionals who walked with the confidence that came from titles and tenure. Emmanuel stayed quiet, observing. That was his gift. Always had been. He watched the way people talked, how they slipped between formal tones and casual banter, and how many still assumed their language was the only one that mattered. He checked into his room and stood by the window for a long time, staring down at the city lights. This was not a janitor's schedule. This was not a mop closet. This was a door. The next morning, the breakout session began. A panel of speakers took the stage. 3 executives, 1 translation specialist, and Emmanuel.
The host introduced him last, and some heads tilted at the sound of his name. He felt the weight of that curiosity like a spotlight. He took a deep breath, stepped forward, and began in English. Then he switched into Portuguese to address the Brazilian attendees, into Korean for the small table near the back, and into Arabic for a handful of North African partners. Each sentence delivered not just clearly, but with tone, rhythm, and intent. The room shifted. People stopped checking their phones. Heads turned. Pens froze in midair. No slides, no gimmicks, just a man speaking their language, meeting them where they were. When he returned to English, he said, "Language is not just vocabulary. It's memory, culture, identity. If your business can't speak the language of your partners, you're not doing business. You're doing translation. And those are not the same thing."
There was a long pause. Then came the applause. It wasn't thunderous, but it was real, and it grew. After the session, people approached him. A Chinese executive who preferred speaking in Mandarin offered his card. A French partner asked if he could recommend training methods for bilingual staff. One attendee, an older South African woman, simply hugged him. "No one has ever spoken Xhosa to me at a business conference," she whispered, eyes wet. "You made me feel seen." He smiled, humbled. It's long overdue. Back at the hotel, Emmanuel sat with a black coffee and a sandwich from the lobby bar. Jared called him that evening, voice clear with pride. "You crushed it. They're still talking about you in the main hall." "I just told the truth," Emmanuel replied. "Sometimes that's all it takes," Jared said. When Emmanuel returned to the office, something had shifted. The badge readers let him into new rooms. The receptionists greeted him with real smiles, not tight ones. A few of the skeptics stayed cold, but most softened. He'd done something they couldn't deny. Then came a call from HR. A new initiative was being greenlit. A company-wide program designed to discover hidden talents in non-executive roles, language skills, cultural fluency, leadership traits. They wanted him to help build it. "You've started something," Jared told him. "Let's not stop here." Emmanuel stared at the proposal document. It was bold, ambitious, unorthodox, and it had his fingerprints all over it. He signed on. Later that week, a janitor on the night crew knocked gently on his office door. "Mr. Brown," she said shyly, "I heard you used to be one of us." He smiled. "I still am, just with a different mop." She laughed, and Emmanuel stood up, offering her a seat. He was no longer an exception. He was a signal. That brilliance wasn't confined to resumes. That genius didn't always come dressed for the boardroom. And that sometimes it took just one open door to start a revolution. 3 months after Emmanuel's first executive meeting, the building at Langford and Keyes didn't just look different, it felt different. It wasn't the paint or the furniture or the art on the walls. It was in the conversations being had, in the people speaking up who'd never felt invited to before. The new internal program, Hidden Depths, was officially launched. Emmanuel helped design every part of it, from the intake questions that encouraged vulnerability instead of credentials, to the workshops built around real-world multilingual challenges. The initiative wasn't about charity, it was about potential. Talent that wasn't waiting outside the company. It was walking its hallways in security uniforms, customer service headsets, cafeteria aprons. And Emmanuel was proof. One afternoon, Jared asked him to join a senior leadership meeting, a quarterly review. Normally, it was dry, just numbers and graphs, but this time something different was on the agenda. Eleanor Bradford, a sharp-tongued board member known for her skepticism, glanced down the table at Emmanuel. "I'll admit," she began, "I didn't think this experiment would last." Jared started to respond, but Emmanuel raised a hand calmly. "It's not an experiment," he said. "It's a correction." That silenced the room. Eleanor's eyes narrowed.
You do realize this initiative of yours makes some of our more traditional managers nervous. Emmanuel nodded. Growth always does. Some think you're skipping the line. He didn't flinch. That's because they think the line only moves in one direction. Eleanor studied him. Then she said nothing more. After the meeting, Jared pulled him aside. You just shut down the most powerful skeptic in the company. I didn't shut her down, Emmanuel said. I gave her truth. Jared grinned. Remind me never to underestimate you again. But not everyone needed reminding. Some had learned already. A few weeks later, Emmanuel received a letter. Handwritten, no return address. My son works here. He's shy, quiet, speaks 5 languages but never told anyone because he thought it wouldn't matter. Until he saw what happened with you. Now he's enrolling in the program. Thank you. Emmanuel read it twice, then slid it into the top drawer of his desk, beside the old janitor badge he still kept. Not to look back with bitterness, but to remember exactly how far the distance was between invisible and invincible. The real shift, though, happened in moments people didn't even see. A meeting with a French client that used to require 2 translators now conducted smoothly with Emmanuel's help. A marketing campaign aimed at Latin American investors, reworded to avoid tone-deaf phrasing that would have backfired. An HR review that now included a section on multilingual assets, directly inspired by Emmanuel's journey. But perhaps the most powerful moment came one Friday afternoon. Emmanuel was walking past the break room when he noticed a young intern crying quietly into her sleeve. He hesitated, then stepped inside. "You okay?" he asked gently. She wiped her eyes. I didn't get the project I wanted, and I think it's because of my accent." He nodded. "What's your first language?" "Cantonese," she said softly. "Then never apologize for it. You know how many people wish they could speak what you do without a translator?" She blinked. "Really?" He smiled. "You're not behind. You're just ahead of people who haven't caught up yet." She let out a shaky laugh. That's a really nice way to look at it." "It's not nice," he said. "It's true." She thanked him. Not with words, but with a long, grateful look. The kind that meant more than applause. As Emmanuel walked back to his office, he realized something. This wasn't just his story anymore. It had become a blueprint, a reminder, that sometimes brilliance doesn't arrive with fanfare. It enters quietly, with a mop, or an accent, or a job no one respects until someone respects the person doing it. By year's end, Langford and Keyes had added 2 new roles to its cultural affairs department, both filled by internal employees who had previously worked in support roles. One was a cafeteria worker from Colombia, the other a mailroom clerk from Sudan. When they stepped into the executive floor for the first time, Emmanuel was waiting by the elevators to greet them. He didn't say much, just nodded. They nodded back. And in that silence was a legacy beginning to take root. Because Emmanuel Brown was no longer just the janitor who spoke 9 languages. He was the one who reminded a company, and maybe a whole industry, that genius doesn't always wear a title. Sometimes it just needs to be seen.